Today we have two guest speakers joining us, Wayne Hintz, QCP Program Director, and Greg Parham, QCP Inspections Manager. Welcome, Wayne and Greg. Thank you so much for being with us today. I will turn the floor over to you.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being with us. Hope we have some reasonably interesting and useful things to offer you today. But first, we have an announcement. This is kind of a red letter day, as you may know, because today is the day that Edition 2 of the Architectural Woodwork Standards becomes effective for bidding new projects unless a prior standard, such as the AWS Edition 1 or one of its predecessors, for example, the Quality Standards Illustrated, unless they are very explicitly and unmistakably named in the project specifications as the reference standard for that project, today is the day that Edition 2 becomes effective. And if you have any questions about AWS Edition 2 or the transition to Edition 2, please get on the AWI website or contact AWI. And now to the business at hand today. Many of you know that Quality Certification Program presents this webinar under the heading QCP Talk about once a quarter. And within roughly the last year, the topics we've covered have been about 75% technical or standards related and about 25% related to how QCP is structured and how it operates, how it interacts with applicants and licensed companies, and what the responsibilities of all the parties involved are in maintaining licenses and certifying projects. And on the technical side, we talked about recently humidity issues and transparent finish veneer matching and shop drawing reviews, that is QCP's shop drawing reviews. And we also had a fourth webinar that dealt with a variety of, for lack of a better term, administrative topics. And today's webinar kind of falls into this administrative category. And having been woodworkers for a while, we know the joys of discussing and debating the fine points of cabinet making for hours and hours. And so the technical stuff, honestly, could be considered to be a little more exciting. However, if you are involved in an inspected project or will be, a review of the entire process might minimally allow you to avoid some bumps in the road and could possibly even make the difference between certifying or not certifying your work. The inspection process it ain't rocket science, but it's not a piece of cake either. And the three things we can tell you for sure is that the more proactive you are during the inspection, the easier the entire process is going to be. And secondly, that documentation is paramount, and finally, communication is everything. The slide you see here are the 5 categories of QCP inspections. Category number 1 is provisional projects, and you can see the general description of this type of inspection. After your firm has its licensing inspection and has achieved licensing in at least one category of work that is covered by the Architectural Woodwork Standards, and at the point that your company has been awarded its first project where the specifications require certification, your company will have a provisional project inspection from QCP. That is, its rep will inspect your project. And for a typical case where a company has both fabrication of the product and installation of the product in its contract, the provisional inspection will involve both an inspection at your facility during the manufacturing process and at least one site inspection to look at the installation. And it is your company's responsibility to register any certified project with QCP when it is awarded to you, if the architect hasn't already done so. And I think it's the case that there are, it's more often the case that you will have to register the project. And in many cases, that's how we become aware that the project even exists. And after registration, the second step for your company, of course, is to request certification and pay the project fees at least 2 weeks in advance of fabrication, although the rule of thumb is that the more lead time there is, the more notice there is for us, the smoother things generally go. And of course, the registration and the certification request and the payment of the project fees that are part of that request, that can all be done electronically on the QCP website. Once the certification is requested, the project is assigned to an inspector by Greg. And for all project types, typically, if we can, we review your shop drawings prior to manufacturing and inspect the product during manufacturing at your facility and inspect the installation at least once. That is kind of the ideal template for the inspection. And for provisional projects in particular, sufficient lead time of the registration and the certification request is important because even if the project is ultimately certified, your company cannot be given credit for that project as a successful provisional project unless we have seen the manufacturing process of that project in your plant. So if we don't see that and the project is certified, it's something called a modified certificate, which simply indicates that we haven't seen something. And this is obviously a negative for your company, since if it takes more than 2 projects to certify 2 projects to meet the provisional requirement, if it takes 3 projects, 4 projects, or whatever, the inspection costs are borne by the company for that 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc. project. So that's an additional cost to you. And at the point that you do have your first 2 projects certified, you become a self-labeling company, which of course means that your future QCP projects may not require inspection, and you can issue your QCP certificates and labels simply by registering the project and requesting certification, and etc. That is, of course, providing the work is actually conforms to the specifications and the standards. The next item, item 2, is the 3-year project. And this project replaced what had been a long-standing requirement for a periodic, rather formal licensing renewal inspection at your facility, and that was complete with, again, providing samples of your work. And let's just say that was not a very popular requirement, and so the 3-year project inspection was part of QCP's solution to streamlining that occasional monitoring of the company's qualifications to be a licensee. And the 3-year project is defined as the next project which requires certification, which is awarded to you after the 3-year anniversary of your last certification date. So in other words, that 3-year project could occur 3.5 years after the anniversary date, 4 years, 10 years. It all depends on when you are awarded that next project requiring certification. Then the third item, the third category, is the QCP random inspection. And QCP can randomly inspect a project for a number of reasons. For example, if the previous inspected project was not able to complete the inspection and certification process for some reason that may have been outside the woodworker's control, something like that, but we're interested in seeing another project, we may choose to inspect one of your certified projects which otherwise might have been a self-labeling project. Another thing that comes up from time to time is an architect and the specifications might require an inspection, or in some cases there have been multiple inspections required in the specifications, and that would be a random inspection for us. Number 4 is a probationary project. Probationary project is required where there's a previous inspected project that ends with outstanding non-compliant items that are significant enough to prevent the project from being certified. But the woodworker in that case has the option of asking requesting acceptance by the architect or the owner's representative of those non-conforming items, and obviously the architect or owner must then in writing grant that acceptance and express their awareness that they are not conforming, that's part of the specifications or the standards. When that happens, what QCP calls that document given granting that the acceptance of those items is a letter accepting variance. And when that occurs, QCP policies require that the next certified project awarded, which has in the scope at least some of the non-compliant categories of work from the previous project, that project be inspected by QCP. And that project, we've seen that can repeat itself until the woodworking company achieves a certified project. The 5th category is the challenge inspection, which doesn't occur frequently, but it does happen from time to time. And that is when any party disagrees with a finding in the inspection report, whether it's a woodworker disagreeing with something that we reported as non-conforming or an architect disagreeing that something is compliant and they believe it's not. There's a process whereby they can challenge that finding, and we will inspect those particular items in the project again. And the general rule of thumb here is that, in terms of costs, the loser pays, and that inspection was performed by a different second QCP representative than the one that did the initial inspection, so we can put a second set of eyes on the project and so on. So those are the 5 categories of inspections we've got. We will move on. Greg is going to talk a little bit later about what happens during and after the inspection, and a lot of you are familiar with some of the administrative stuff we've just talked about that takes place before the inspection, but there were a couple of things that I thought it was worth mentioning that come up repeatedly and are easy to avoid and can cause a problem if they're not avoided, and can cause a problem with certification of the project if they're not anticipated. And the first of these is submittals, and specifically the lack of awareness by some companies that there must be written permission to change any specific specification or line item in the standards. And what you're seeing on your screen here is an item from the QCP policies. It's actually in the glossary at the beginning of the policies. And it says contract document conveying written permission to modify from a line item in the specifications or standards. That's got to be specifically requested and general approval of the shop drawings, which contain one or more such modifications, does not in itself constitute permission to modify. And for a lot of you, that's an old concept and old hat, but for a surprising number of companies, it is not the practice. So even if you have a set of shop drawings which has been reviewed by the architect and generally approved and stamped, that doesn't constitute permission to change details that are specified or in the standards. And this next slide is from the standards, and it's basically the way the standards discuss exactly the same concept. This is in section 1 of the standards, and it says the shop drawings are the place where the manufacturer is encouraged to make technical suggestions so that the architect and the owner can take advantage of their experience. But again, changes incorporated within shop drawings in themselves are not a request for approval. Changes must be specifically addressed in separate written documentation. This slide, I'm sure many of you have seen something like this on your shop drawings quite a bit. This is an architect's drawing, review stamp, and it expresses more or less the same concept we've been talking about here, which is separate, independent permission to change line item specifications, but mainly they address that from the standpoint that just because we approve these drawings, no matter what is in these drawings, you still have to comply with the specifications, obviously, unless they've been changed in some other forms. And just to give you a concrete example of this, last month we were involved with a project in which the woodworker substituted melamine in the cabinet interiors. These were plastic laminate cabinets. Melamine was substituted for vertical grade laminate, which was very clearly called out in the specifications. And as this unfolded, the architect very firmly denied that he had ever given permission for that change, despite the fact that melamine was called out and identified clearly in several of the approved shop drawing casework section views. And in this case, the architect had a stamp similar to the one you're seeing on your screen there. The text was very similar. And the woodworker could not produce any specific written permission to change that specification and a couple of others. So the melamine interiors became one reason that the project couldn't be certified. So that little extra step to get clear permission can be very important to certification. One thing I'll mention, because we don't talk about it a lot, but when QCP is inspecting a project, that same principle of specific permission applies to mock-ups. And in fact, in the project I was just talking about, there were mock-ups and there were no specific requests to change some of the things in those mock-ups which did not meet specifications. And, you know, of course, as woodworkers, none of this seems quite fair in a way, but that is the requirement, and it is the reality that really QCP inspectors have no choice but to acknowledge and deal with. So the moral of the story here is that providing even some simple documentation for these types of issues can save everybody a lot of angst in the end. And briefly, one final thing is care and handling, and specifically humidity and temperature. This comes up quite a bit, and a woodworker typically reports to us a project in which there is some type of significant failure of the woodwork because they know that the temperature and humidity in the project space is not stable. And of course, quite often a general contractor may have insisted that the installation begin before the space was properly enclosed or conditioned, or maybe the HVAC is not operating properly. In a case, well, and you can see the first three items listed there from Section 2 of the standards, the architect, general contractor, and owner are responsible for some significant aspects of this question, but there are also some things that the woodworker is responsible for in the standards, and that you see under 4.1 there. And if you've got a case where a general contractor or owner insists that the millwork be delivered and installed when conditions in the site are not within acceptable limits as outlined in Section 2 of the standards, if you can send them something in writing pointing out the possibility of millwork failure because of that, and ask them to give you a waiver acknowledging the warning or whatever you would include in that, that is certainly our recommendation. And if that can be done in a form where you can get some written acknowledgement of receipt of that, for example, certified mail, that of course is even better. And if the GC or owner or whoever is the party you're communicating with doesn't acknowledge you or give you the waiver you're looking for, you will at least have evidence to offer a QCP inspector that you have tried to avoid installing the millwork under those conditions and have done your due diligence. And that is, due diligence is something else that is very important in the inspection process. I should also mention that if you are involved in a project, whether or not it requires certification, whether you know humidity and temperature is going to be an issue down the road, especially, let's say, if it's a project that you're doing as a self-labeling company, you can request us to inspect your product right after it's installed, and in most cases, that is not going to cost you anything more than the project fee you've already paid, and it will give you a good third-party record that when you installed this stuff, it was perfectly fine. So 8 months later, when the owner called us complaining, you've got some record and something to hang your hat on. And of course, temperature and humidity monitoring devices are always good to use. I know that in some cases it's justifiable, in other cases it's not, if it's a small project or whatever, but if you smell temperature and humidity trouble, that's not a bad thing to do, and if it's an inspected project, that often also comes in handy. Now I'm going to turn it over to Greg Parham, who is going to talk about what happens once an inspection is turned over to him. Greg is the QCP Projects Manager. Greg?
Okay, thank you, Wayne. So now that we've covered some of the aspects of the before, I'm going to take you through the during and the after. So the first thing we want to cover here is inspection scheduling. And key elements I'm going to cover are who is responsible for scheduling a required inspection, at what point an inspection should occur, and what happens if the schedule changes. So what typically happens is once we receive your label fees, the inspector is sent an inspection notice, and he will make contact with you to let you know that he is responsible for doing the inspection, and he will also be requesting shop drawings, and he will also be requesting a project schedule. As for who is actually responsible for scheduling the required inspections, that is actually up to the woodworker. As stated before, the rep will make the contact, but you know what your schedule is, and he's working with you to make sure that he can get in there to do the scheduling. The key element in making your schedule for the inspection is that we do require a 14-day notice. That's calendar days to schedule the inspection. Anytime that we can get further ahead on the date, the better, because it helps the inspector and also helps us to keep the cost down. So when should an inspection occur? As a general rule, for fabrication and installation, a minimum of 75% of the product should be completed or installed. When we're talking about this, of course, we do allow some fluctuation, but we really want to stick to the 75%. Key factors on deciding when you're ready for the inspection is that there should be a wide cross-section of items in the project scope. What we're talking about there is that if the project has laminate casework, laminate countertops, wood wall paneling, and wood casework, you should have samples of all that product available for the inspection. Now, we are also aware that a lot of projects can be phased where the GC may want to have the wall paneling fabricated and installed on the project, and you may have to get that done, get that out before you even get started on the casework, or you may be just starting on the casework. In those situations, the key to it is let us know that that's happening. Give us notice, and we can make accommodations for that. For us to walk in to do an inspection and you tell us then, it makes it very difficult. So what items are we going to be inspecting? For fabrication, the key elements that we need there, and this is mainly for casework, are we need to see machine parts so that we can review the joinery against the standards and the specifications. We need to see assembled product so we can verify the fit and alignment. And in the situation with wood, we need to see finished product so we can evaluate the finish. For installation inspection, the product that we are going to be inspecting should be fully installed, including final adjustments, so that we don't want to come in to do an installation inspection and have a bunch of cabinets installed without doors on, because we can't make the determination if the door alignments are proper or not. So what happens if the schedule changes, or what if you schedule the inspection and then something comes up? We all know that sometimes you'll have multiple projects running through and one will take a priority. So you schedule the inspection and then you end up having to work on the other project, and you don't get very much done on that project that we're supposed to be inspecting. One thing to be aware of is that if you do not have a sufficient amount of the project available at the time of the inspection, it could require a re-inspection. And the cost of a re-inspection are the responsibility of the woodworker. So if you see that you're getting in trouble on the schedule, let us know. The other thing is that our reps will typically give you a call as it gets closer to the date to make sure that you're ready. And if there's any question, you're always better to cancel or postpone the inspection than to go ahead and go forward with it and have us walk in and there not be enough product out there. Now, there are some costs as a result of canceling or postponing an inspection, but it is related to the amount of time before the project, before the inspection date. And those costs are, if it's canceled or postponed less than 7 calendar days, but more than 48 hours before the scheduled date and time, there will be a cancellation fee of $250. If canceled or postponed 48 hours or less before the scheduled date and time, the cancellation fee will be $500. Now, I do want to point out that, we understand there are some things that are acts of nature and things along those lines that can result in requiring a cancellation. In fact, we actually had a woodworker, the inspector was in the air flying to do the installation, to do the inspection. It just so happened that a building on the same street that this woodworker was on, they closed down the streets. When the inspector landed, the woodworker called him, let him know that he couldn't get to the building. we're not going to hold you responsible for something like that. So just so you're aware, we are flexible to us when it comes to things along those lines. Okay, so what happens when you have that GC that comes in there and says, oh, we got to have this installed now? And you're looking at it going, well, I'm supposed to be having the fabrication inspection, but the GC is wanting it now. First and foremost thing I want everybody to understand is the QCP program should never be used as a reason to delay a project. And so we don't want you telling the GC, I can't do it because I haven't done the fabrication inspection. That should never be the case. What you need to do in this situation is notify your representative, your inspector, or contact me. We can almost always find a way to accommodate the change. We're not going to hold you responsible because the GC has required you to do this. Now, it may result as Wayne had alluded to earlier, in what is now called a modified certificate. And again, a modified certificate is that the project is certified, but it just indicates that we have not been able to view the fabrication to determine its conformance. So now you've had your inspection, and what happens after that? So following the inspection, the QCP rep is going to complete his inspection report, and he's going to make a statement regarding the conformance. He's going to forward it to me, and I'm going to review his report and get it ready for distribution. So in a situation where we all hope that all of the inspections always come out, is that everything is found to be conforming. In that situation, then, a copy of the report will be sent to the licensee and the architect. And if this is what I refer to as the last inspection on a project, so if you've had your fabrication inspection, and this is your installation inspection, and everything is conforming, and we don't have any outstanding fees for re-inspections, then I will release the certificates to be sent to you to distribute to the affected parties. And now, if the project is found to be non-conforming, in those situations, the QCP representative is also going to state in the report whether it requires a re-inspection or if proof of corrections will be accepted. Oftentimes, he'll also tell you at the end of the inspection whether or not it's going to require a re-inspection or proof of corrections. The same scenario as before, I will review the report, and then I will get it ready for distribution. With a project that has non-conforming items, a copy of the reports will be sent to you along with a 10-day letter. And this is an important item in regards to the project. The 10-day letter requires that you respond to the QCP representative in writing within 10 calendar days of the report being sent to you, stating the plan to resolve the nonconformities noted in the report along with an estimated date of completion. And the key to this is a lot of times we have had situations where a woodworker has called us and said, this is what we're going to do, but we actually need it in writing also. And please be aware, we're not looking for a detailed explanation of what you're going to do to correct the nonconformities. We're basically looking to see, are you going to correct the nonconformities or not? This is also an opportunity where if you feel that there are nonconformities in the report that you do not feel you are responsible for example, if we note damage and you feel that that damage was a result of another trade, you can state it in your response, and we will take that into consideration. Now, once we send you the report, there are 7 days, 7 calendar days following the date that we send it to you, we're going to be sending a copy of the report to the architect. We do this, and we have the 7-day, what we refer to as a 7-day embargo, to allow you the opportunity to see the report, to already be working on a plan of how you're going to respond to it, so that you don't get that phone call from the architect when he sees the report and wants to know what's going on, and you really haven't had the opportunity to look at it. Now, this is just a sample of a typical 10-day letter. It's a fake company and a fake project, but this is what you would typically see as an attachment with a report. So now, what can you do about nonconformities? There are 3 options for addressing nonconformities. One is make corrections, which we strongly recommend. The second is provide a letter accepting variations from the architect, owner, or owner's representative. And as Wayne had alluded to before, this can result in your company being placed on probation. The third is to do nothing, which we hope that doesn't happen, and that can lead to revocation from the program. So you do what we all hope that you will do, and that's make corrections. After you make the corrections, if the report required a reinspection, then you need to schedule another inspection, and the QCP rep will make out a second report, and you will be invoiced for all the costs associated with the reinspection. If the report required proof of corrections, what we are looking for there is that you provide sufficient photos of the corrections. The photos should clearly identify the report item number and location for verification. And once these should be sent to the QCP rep, he will review those photographs, and if he feels he's gotten enough information to make a decision, a determination, he will make the determination. And again, you'll be invoiced for his cost for reviewing the photographs. Provided everything is approved, which again, that's hard. That's everybody's goal here. The project will be certified. Now, prior to the certificates being released to the woodworker, all the invoices have to be paid. I should also mention here that also a copy of the revised report or the old report indicating that proof of corrections have been provided will also be sent to the woodworker and to the architect. Letter accepting variations. Again, this letter must be from the architect, owner, or owner's representative. It must state acceptance of the project with the noted nonconformities. By that, what we're looking for in that letter is that there's some indication that the architect, owner, owner's representative are aware that there are nonconformities and they are accepting the project, quote, as is or with noted nonconformities, or another way of some of them will state it that they have requested that no corrections be made. If it just says that we accept the project, well, we're going to ask you to get more detail. Now, a letter accepting variations does not guarantee a project certification. The final decision on whether or not we will certify that project is turned over to the executive director to make that decision. If he decides that the project can be certified, then the certification will be what is called a limited certificate, which means it will indicate that yes, the project is certified, but there are items that are still non-conforming. In the event that you do get a letter accepting variations, your status will be changed to probation, which, as again Wayne had alluded to earlier, the next project with the same scope found non-conforming will be inspected, and you will be responsible for all the costs. What we're talking about there is if the items that were non-conforming and weren't corrected were laminate casework, then your next project that has laminate casework in it, we're going to inspect and you will be responsible for the cost of the inspections. And you will remain on probation until a project that we've inspected achieves certification. And the last one, which we hope nobody chooses, is to do nothing. In that situation, the licensee will be first placed on probation, on suspension. And suspension means that you will not have access to the website, and QCP will not provide any services. Following this, along with the suspension, the revocation process will begin, and upon revocation, the woodworker will have to reapply to rejoin the quality certification program. That is it for our presentation today.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg and Wayne, for your time and contributions in delivering today's webinar.